everyone. Welcome to something that I've never done before. I've never done any sort of segment on YouTube where I talk about various things in wrestling that have either impressed me or made me happy recently. But if you've seen from Wrestlemania 36 this week, there's something everyone that's been talking about on Twitter and social media called the Firefly Funhouse match. And it just ended up being so crazy and insane, and I had to talk about it outside of my Twitch stream. And I also wanted to talk about it with someone, so if you could introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, my name is Patrick, but on Twitch and other parts of social media that's the only real part of social media that I use other than Instagram, which is just for my personal use. I am known as Rainbow Snake. I am not really anybody of note as of now, but for my credentials, I have a certificate in digital media production, and I am hoping to work in something like television and the like.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So, Patrick's just someone and a friend that I talk about wrestling with, and we both loved the segment last night, so I figured I would just bring him in to, talk about the Firefly Funhouse match. So, let's just start with our general impressions.
I want to start by saying that what happened was with a Firefly Funhouse match is something I've always kind of wanted to see in wrestling, and that is deconstruction or metatextual writing within professional wrestling.
Let alone WWE, because I've just never seen WWE produce something as deep, as complex as... it's a very complex piece of medium that has been seen in other promotions, but with WWE specifically, it's just something I've been wanting to see from them for a long time.
I think it's the best way we could have gotten that from WWE because, there's a whole thing that's going around with certain indie promotions where you have Invisible Men matches. Those things can be considered in some way deconstruction of professional wrestling. But WWE's never going to do something like that. They would look at that, they'd say, it's too ridiculous, that's not what we're about, that's not our brand. But they're not opposed to cinematic wrestling.
No, not at all. It's not that, I don't feel like it's not that they were, opposed to it. In fact, it has been done in WWE before. I think before we talked about it, or before we went on the recording today, you were mentioning the Slammy Awards in '87.
Yeah, I said that it was sort of I would say it laid the groundwork. All the multiple camera angles, the way it went through different areas. It was cut in a way that was more similar to a television fight scene or a movie fight scene, as opposed to a wrestling match. Right.
And I'm thinking about the Boneyard match from night one as well, because I love that match a lot too, in the sense that it did remind me a lot of a television or movie fight scene. But I don't know, for some reason with the Firefly Funhouse match, there's just something about it that is just so different from other cinematic wrestling matches that I've seen in the past.
WWE in particular, because they've been around the longest, they're still going, and they're still in a very big position. But they've never really done something that really addresses their continuity quite as much as that. They've never done something that would really explored it and really took advantage of, the action and how it was received by the fans and how that could be used to tell a greater story.
Funhouse match was. Acknowledging the past is something WWE doesn't like to do very often. But in the context of how this match happened, when you consider John Cena's character and The Fiend's character and their history together, and kind of going into the themes of fear and anxiety, being meta was the best way to present this match. And with all the references and all the Easter eggs they had it in this segment, I was so shocked.
Yeah,
you were there. You were watching the stream I had over the weekend.
Mm-hmm. I was watching the stream and I was watching the show itself. I was thinking about cinematic matches and cinematic wrestling in WWE itself, because upon thinking about it, they've done it a little bit more than I thought they did. I recall in 1999, in the first official cinematic wrestling match, I believe it was The Rock versus Mankind in the Empty Arena match, if you recall.
Yes. the very famous Super Bowl halftime show match.
There was that. I recall that there was a House of Horrors match before Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton.
Yes, there was the House of Horrors match.
And I've never seen it, but I recall Michael P.S. Hayes, when he originally pitched the idea and I think booked it, I think he said it was supposed to be more like a movie. Also with the more modern House of Horrors match and Wyatt family versus the New Day, the Ultimate Deletion. I came realize, oh wow, Bray's been in quite a few of these.
And I remember when that happened at Payback in 2017, it was just shat on. That match just got a lot of negative reception. There were reports of the crowd in, I believe it's in San Jose, California. But a lot of people just turned on that match. And I think the reason why that is just because of how both men were used. Because cinematic wrestling can be effective, but you have to make sure that both of the subjects that you are producing this match about get something out of it. And for both Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, they just look completely ridiculous going in and coming out of this match. Whereas where we have Cena and The Fiend with the Firefly Funhouse match, you have Bray Wyatt coming out as the winner and the victor at the end of the segment, while you have Cena going through themes of pity and anxiety. But I think with Cena, with the legacy that he's created over 15 years, that segment made him look strong when you look back at his entire character. You just made a completely deep characterization of Cena, which I wouldn't imagine saying something like this like 10 years ago.
Yeah, same. And it's interesting because to go into a little bit of my history with wrestling and like how I got into it, it took me a little bit to try to remember, okay, what exactly got me into it? And I think I figured it out.
Right.
It was back when I was around 10 years old, and there was a friend of mine at the time. He lived in the neighborhood. He was, me and him were really close. He had, I believe it was SmackDown versus Raw games, 2006, I want to say. Is
2006 the one with, was it Batista on the cover of 2006?
I think so.
I think. I was going to say Triple H, but Triple H was on the cover of 2007, which is, by the way, the best wrestling game.
He brought that over on the PS2. Both of us had PS2s at the time. And the person that I picked, being a kid, not knowing anything, I picked John Cena.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I liked playing him because I could spam his drop kick, and I love that type of move in fiction and fights. It just,
hey, drop kicks are sweet.
Yeah, they're great. But that's how I got into it, was through Cena. And as I got older, he's not really evolved any more than when I first watched him. And I wasn't one of the people who booed the living shit out of him like a lot of people did. I didn't do that mainly because I couldn't really see anything too wrong with him. Stories of his politicking aside.
Right.
It's not necessarily his fault.
It's not really. I was actually one of those quote unquote edgy fans in high school where I would just like boo Cena because like I just wanted stronger writing in wrestling. But now that I'm older and more mature, I can look at Cena's run, especially in the late 2000s and early 2010s when he was getting that much hate with a wider lens. Cena's not a bad person either. Like, he's charismatic. He's a great wrestler. He's pulled off a lot of fantastic matches. A lot of wrestlers that have been with WWE have had some of their best matches with Cena. So I think that speaks a lot to his work ethic. And yeah, he got a lot of exposure, but I don't think it was like his fault or anything. Like, he was just doing his best.
I did boo him when I was in high school, but that was because CM Punk came along, and holy shit, talk about a character who just spoke to me. I was all in on his tattoos. I loved that. The straight edge thing spoke to me. That all that stuff just seemed disgusting. So when he left, that really made me sad.
Yeah, I was heartbroken too when Punk left. He was one of my favorite. Actually, I think he was my favorite wrestler in high school, at least until the Shield debuted on the main roster. then I kind of just walked over to John Moxley. But yeah, like CM Punk's one of his best matches in WWE was with Cena at Money in the Bank 2011. Cena's not a bad wrestler. Like, he's done a lot of great stuff. I know it's a meme in the community, especially 10 years ago, where he's like, oh, he can't wrestle, he can only do the 5-knuckle shuffle, and ugh. But in hindsight, when you look at all the people he's faced, he can work.
Yeah. Hell, at one point, the idea of the 5 moves of doom was, at one point, that wasn't an insult. At one point, that was meant to refer to a sequence that would telegraph to the audience the end is coming in some sort of way. It was like how to very quickly bring this up. If you've watched older Jake the Snake Roberts matches, before he would do the DDT, he would do the sort of lasso move with his arm.
Yep, the lasso move.
And that's one of the best things you could do is with your finisher in that, tell everybody it's going home, get ready. Because this is something that even some wrestling fans don't understand. When wrestlers are in the ring, when they're doing this, they are, through their actions, telling the audience how to react.
Of course.
That's something that's very difficult for a lot of people to understand. It was hard for me to get that at first, but, partially thanks to just getting an understanding in psychology and how our reactions, how our emotions, that can be programmed and how that can be attributed to action, I started to connect the dots. I said, oh, wait a minute. But back to the Firefly Funhouse.
Yeah, so like the reason why we talk about just Cena's perception in the WWE is because it played a very prominent role in the Firefly Funhouse segment, especially with the WCW Monday Night Nitro segment. The parallels between Hogan's heel turn and John Cena in that match are just like 1-to-1 perfect. Because again, with all these people hating Cena 10 years ago, one of the biggest things people want, and I would argue like people even still want this today, even though I doubt it's gonna happen, just based on Cena's schedule.
I don't think there's any way.
No.
I think at one point the argument for why it couldn't happen was he makes too much merchandise, it's too late, and there's nobody who could really effectively turn him heel. Now, after the Firefly Funhouse, what do you... I mean, I'd say that this is a conclusion.
Yeah, I would agree, because the way that they're just blatantly pointing out, like, hey, one of your biggest fears is not being as profitable as you were when you were a face, that's really meta. That's something only the fans could get. That's something, like, as a fan who's frustrated with Cena, or who wants to see him get better, just dealing with the fact that a heel turn will probably never happen and it won't happen is just, it's really complex. It goes into a lot of Cena's complex characterization, but also to the fans too. Like, I feel like the fans were mirrored a lot back just because of how meta it was.
I think the to talk about just one particular parts, what was the part that you like absolutely did not expect to see? Because for me, it was Saturday Night Main Event.
Saturday Night Main Event I didn't expect to see. Although, if we're being honest, I didn't expect to see any of the stuff we did last night. But I think the moment okay, there are two that I want to mention. So the first I want to mention happens near the beginning of the match where the Fiend's like, you can look, but you can't touch. And I'm like, oh no! And he's referencing the Bella Twins.
Right.
And I just didn't expect him to mention the breakup. And that also highlights the fear of commitment that Cena has, if we're going with the theme of, like, fears and what Cena fears. And then the second one, obviously, you were there for it, was when the Vince puppet screamed, "It's such good shit." Oh my gosh. I'm still not over that, because I just did not expect them to be that into an in-joke.
I think the last time that I had ever seen a wrestling company be so inside baseball like that, I think the last time I ever saw that was WCW 2000. Now, hold on.
Okay.
Just wait. The war flashbacks can wait.
But yes.
But it was during the reboot Nitro, if you know what I'm talking about.
Right. Okay, yes. I think I know exactly what you're going to bring up, but go ahead.
It was when Eric Bischoff said to Sid, "What's the matter? Can't find your scissors?" Which I think the only person who got that joke was Sid, Russo, Bischoff, and Mark Madden on commentary. There's no reason anybody in the audience would get that.
Exactly, and I know that can create, like, muddy waters between promotions or groups of wrestlers, but I just love it when wrestling pulls shit like that, where they just go so far into the reaches of in-jokes that they have to make something like that. And I was actually talking to one of my wrestling friends last night after Mania went off the air, and we were both like, there's no fucking way Vince had anything to do with what happened last night. No way.
I mean, yeah, I have to agree. Like, why would Vince agree to all this
exactly
stuff?
just because of, like, how meta it was, just because of especially the good shit line. I guarantee you he's heard that because Vince knows everything. If Vince knows that Brody Lee is making fun of him in AEW, I'm pretty sure he knows about the good shit line from that Talk is Jericho episode.
Yeah, it's so, and it's also just weird and very weird in general, in such a way that Vince wouldn't really get it, even if you removed all the inside baseball stuff, even if you removed the pot shots. I think Vince would just say, "What's going on?"
Vince would just be clueless.
And to his credit, that was that Firefly Funhouse match. It was for what I like to call the wrestling weirdos, the people who like stuff that isn't necessarily traditional.
That's me.
Yeah, that's me as well. You know, that was very much for the specific type of fan.
And, like, matches like the Firefly Funhouse match, I like seeing wrestling progress in this direction. Like, gone are the days where it's just, like, two big buff men in the ring just fighting it out. And, like, it's obviously, like, the storytelling and the athleticism is still there, but I love it when wrestling nowadays just goes in these weird directions, because it's proof that it's still an evolving medium. You could still do so much with wrestling. And that's why I've been loving cinematic matches like last night and the Boneyard match.
Cinematic wrestling, and just the Firefly Funhouse match in particular that I want to highlight, it is, in my personal opinion, the next step in storytelling in professional wrestling.
Yes. Very, very hard to agree.
Yeah, because you can do a lot in a somewhat traditional ring for ring storytelling. There's a lot of leeway. There's a ceiling, though. And that ceiling partly is the way in which wrestling matches are traditionally produced. The ceiling has gotten higher, but it's still there. You know, we have ways of messing with the arenas to try and use that effect for storytelling. You have the ring, you know, the classic thing of the ring breaks and suddenly a demon pops out, and that can bring it to a story of one of the characters. But you can't really go quite as far as what we saw with the Firefly Funhouse in a normal style or somewhat traditional style wrestling match.
Right, and I think that's why wrestling is so unique. Because unlike a lot of entertainment mediums, when you produce live wrestling, you really only have one take to do it. Like, if you're producing a live episode of Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Dynamite, etc., if you fuck up a move or if you mess up your lines, that's it. There are limits. Like, it's not a bad thing because you could still do incredible stuff there, but when you start considering cinematic wrestling, like wrestling that can be done outside of live television, you're bringing in an entirely new set of resources, editing, stories that you can bring to the forefront. And that's why I appreciated shows like Lucha Underground and segments like The Final Deletion, because they're not only expanding what wrestling can do, but they're also introducing us to new stories and new ways that those stories can be told.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? I think I talked about this in the chat during the stream.
Right.
I can't wait to see what AEW is going to do for its cinematic wrestling.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's a very high bar now.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And with Matt Hardy basically taking the wheel with everything having to do with that, I'm super, super, super excited for what they eventually do with it. And I also just want to bring up a point where I'm not going to pretend that, like, I'm a huge WWE fan or whatever. Well, I've watched them for years. Like, they were the first promotion that I got into when I was a kid. I think a lot of people could speak when they say that WWE was the first promotion they watched, because it's so mainstream. But the point is, the past couple of years, I want to say since 2017, I've just not been feeling the WWE as much as I used to. And I just wanted them to be innovative, do something different, something balls to the walls crazy. And I think what we got this weekend is a good start. Both the Firefly Funhouse and the Boneyard match, it's something that they don't have to do every month, because I think it can get oversaturated at a point. But if they produce more cinematic matches, or even just be more creative, then I think that can get some lapsed fans who have fallen out of WWE a little bit more interested in the product again. Because that's all I've wanted for them. All I wanted for WWE was to just be successful and to just have that creative breath of fresh air. It's something I've been waiting for a long time. Very long time.
I actually want to talk about something because I had I did some thinking about it while you were bringing it up.
Yeah, go ahead.
About the Boneyard match. Mm-hmm. That's like a scene from a horror movie.
Oh, it absolutely played out like a horror movie. Like, the tension there. I applauded the selection of editing, the music. Oh my gosh. I fucking love the music in the Boneyard match.
I liked it. I did too. One exception.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like the use of Metallica for The Undertaker.
Really? Interesting.
And here, let me say this. This isn't because I don't like Metallica.
Okay.
It's because that's one of the weaker songs off the Hardwired to Self-Destruct album. WrestleMania 33, when they used Am I Savage for Seth Rollins versus Triple H, great song for that, honestly. That was one of the better ones off the album. Now That We're Dead, I didn't really feel anything for.
Okay.
So.
Like, I just remember when I heard the motorcycle rooming up, and then that started playing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Biker Taker. The return of the Biker Taker character is someone that people have been clamoring for a long time. And it's just so fascinating to see him be successful in this role. I know people have been saying for the past few years now, they're like, oh, Undertaker should retire, or he should, leave. And last night rejuvenated his character in a lot of ways. Like, everyone has been praising the Boneyard and the Firefly Funhouse match so much. And that's because they're letting people like Taker, Bray Wyatt, and Cena just be so innovative and free with creative control that they have over these segments. So let me ask you this question, because I'm just curious. So, had WrestleMania 36 still gone on as planned, so nothing that's happening in the world right now happened, life's normal, Mania 36 is still being held at the stadium in Tampa Bay, Florida, do you think that the Boneyard and Firefly Funhouse matches would happen the way they did?
Would have happened? Would have played out
that way? So
okay,
still cinematic. Like, assume that the audience would have watched what we watched, like, on the big giant Titantron.
I feel good in my assertion that the Boneyard match probably wouldn't have happened the way it did if it was, in front of a live crowd. The Firefly Funhouse match, though, I don't know. I can't say for certain that we would or would not have gotten what we did.
Right. And it's, so weird, too, because, again, as we mentioned before, just because the content in that segment, and just because of how many in-jokes and how many meta things were in there, I wonder how awkward it would have been to present that in front of a crowd, but it's just weird.
Yeah. I'm of the opinion that the Firefly Funhouse match actually did better with the empty arena, way better. Because, all I would have wanted, if I was in production, if I was over there, if I was, a part of the crew, what I would have hoped for the crowd reaction, dead silence. Stunned, dead silence.
Yep. I can imagine that.
That was a segment made to kind of make people's brains go a little wild.
Right. I think all of us were Titus O'Neil at the end. One of my favorite parts of the match last night was the cut to Titus O'Neil at the end. And the facial expression that he had, and he's just like, I don't know what I just saw. Same here, Titus.
Yeah, I mean, well, I knew what I saw. I just don't know if I saw the same thing as everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like when Cena came out at the PC, I thought that like the Firefly Funhouse was gonna be like inside the physical ring. So I'm like, okay, I guess they're not doing a cinematic thing for this one. I actually thought that like the puppets were gonna be at ringside. It's just gonna be Cena beating up puppets. Okay,
Yeah,
not gonna lie.
I thought it was gonna be.
Not gonna lie, that sounds entertaining.
Yeah, that sounds entertaining. Or like maybe like elements of the funhouse like came into the ring in the area.
Right.
That's what I thought. But I love this idea of the Fiend, like so much power to just like warp the broadcast through his own will.
There's just so much potential, and there not even potential, but like there's just so much power and strength with Bray Wyatt's current character as the Fiend. I guess the silver lining, I just realized this now, the silver lining to him losing the title to Goldberg at the Saudi show is that we got the Firefly Funhouse match out of it. Because the rumor going into Mania was Roman was going to face whoever was the champion at Mania. But obviously, for health reasons that are totally understandable, Roman dropped out of Mania.
I don't think I'm the first person to say this, and I doubt I'm the last.
Right.
But it was a bad call to give Bray Wyatt the title, the Universal Championship, so early when plans didn't seem that he would have it for very long. Or that the plans would dictate that if he lost it, it wouldn't really do anything significant to his character right in that moment.
Exactly.
The problem started once he was in the Universal Championship picture. That's my personal opinion. Then who's going to beat him? And how can you do that and manage to convince the audience that this makes sense?
Right.
You know, on some level, if you think of Goldberg as like the most unstoppable force ever, period, no question asked. If you think of him as that, I suppose that could work, but there's also the circumstance surrounding him, that match being in Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
And that made people turn cynical immediately.
Yep, because you know how Goldberg and Saudi in that situation is. Just the entire circumstances surrounding that match back in February was just a lot of muddy water to tread around. And I mean Goldberg lost the title in 4 minutes. I actually think that the title match that Goldberg had was longer than the Drew McIntyre one. Because I went on Wikipedia after the show. I wanted to see how much the Drew McIntyre Brock Lesnar match clocked in for. 2 minutes and 35 secones.
Wow.
I mean, I don't think 35 is the exact number of seconds, but the minutes definitely 2.
Wow, they really wanted to get Drew over, and they succeeded.
I mean, yeah, we got to see Paul Heyman's face after the match.
I think the last time we saw Paul Heyman's face like that was when Brock broke Undertaker's streak.
Yep. But yeah, I'm just really happy in general that Bray and Cena got a lot of benefits out of that segment. It was certainly a win-win for both wrestlers. Like, despite the fact Cena lost, just all the flashbacks just made fans remember, oh, wow, Cena's, we had a lot of good memories with Cena, you know? Got back a lot of good points.
I'm trying to remember, because I saw this earlier today. I was watching a Cultaholic video that was, I think it was either graded or what happened at WrestleMania 36 Night 2. It was one of them. And somebody in the comments said this, and it made me very intrigued. And it's that the Fiend has this great power, and it is that the Fiend can find a performer's greatest fears, use that to change them so greatly that it can change their alignment between face and heel. Even when Seth Rollins faced the Fiend, and after he lost, he started to become a a lot more self-centered.
That is such a good point.
Yeah, he became a lot more self-centered, and he became, like, a heel. The Miz fought Bray Wyatt, then he got changed. It went from this kind of milquetoast, limp babyface, and then he went back to being the egotistical, like, Hollywood heel. Daniel Bryan, he went from what he was after fighting The Fiend, he turned into the indie darling superstar.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And, like,
now, I don't want to defend the fact that the match happened, but pointed this out.
Right.
Goldberg never really has any sort of fears or character that could change. He's just Goldberg. So The Fiend couldn't really do anything against that. That's not to say it was a good idea to do the match, but if you want to look at it from a greater storytelling perspective. So what was Cena's fear? We had a lot of them, as it turns out, but one of the biggest ones seems to be becoming irrelevant.
That's been a big theme through all of his fears. At least in some sense, whether it was spelled out for you or not, there was some sort of hint of, oh, I don't want to be, irrelevant.
Or rather, he doesn't want to be unloved. He always wants to be the hero. He always wants to be, the champion. Not necessarily the fact that he holds the belt, but champion in a more traditional sense. As in somebody who can conquer great feat.
Exactly. And that's something I agree with. And that's just been the heart and soul of Cena's character. Not just in this match, but just for, I would essentially say 90% of his career. If you don't count the early years on SmackDown, Cena's character, when you get to the root of it, is he's this helpful person who's the face of the WWE, or was the face of the WWE. Like, I know he still does PR and stuff, but compared to younger stars like Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Becky Lynch, like, those are the stars that are carrying WWE now. Cena, on the other hand, for the past few years, has only come back on a part-time basis for Mania. And maybe a couple episodes of Raw and SmackDown. So the irrelevancy fear is definitely in play here.
And so what happens to Cena once all those fears are utilized, and then his character changes to what he doesn't want? Well, that would mean that his character is gone.
Literally vanished to thin air.
Yeah, if it's using fear to dictate what will change, then for Cena, it would be just becoming gone, undone within the universe of the WWE.
That's really sad to think about. I know the match was wacky and insane and zany, but when you mention just the irrelevancy of Cena actually being there, it's just so sad, especially for kids who grew up with Cena, whether that was in the Ruthless Aggression era or the PG era even, because more of the people who grew up in the PG era are now getting on the internet and talking about wrestling now. The impact that Cena's had on millions of people, not just kids, cannot be, understated. It's wild how much of an impact this guy's had. And now, just a WWE without John Cena. It's weird to think about.
Yeah.
I can imagine a WWE without Chris Jericho or Roman Reigns, etc., but Cena was just such a staple and such a face of the company for years that it's going to be so weird to see him sporadically be on WWE now. I better hope he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame next year.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that this might have been his retirement match, and we didn't know it until the end.
If so, what a fucking way to go out. I would love to go out in a match like that. Because
if the idea is supposed to be, John Cena has been so ingrained into the DNA of the company because of all he's done, how do you take him away? By very eldritch means, I suppose you could say.
I guess so. That goes along. That's a synonym.
Firefly Funhouse is some straight up Nightmare on Elm Street shit.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
If the Boneyard match, I guess the best way I could describe it is something so similar to Friday the 13th or Halloween. You got because the Undertaker's like this big imposing aspects of him that are lifted straight from Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees.
I just think that with everything that just went into play with that match, I would also agree that that was Cena's last ride. And Honestly, if you were to ask me last week or a month ago or a year ago, just who would I want to see Cena have a retirement match with? Obviously, Bray Wyatt. Like, it's weird because I've always thought that Cena and Bray Wyatt had sort of an unfinished story. Because there was something about that chair spot at Mania 30 that I was like, this could open up some long-term storytelling later on. And I can't think of anyone else that I would want to see Cena have a retirement match with. It just seems to me that Bray Wyatt was the only credible choice for a retirement match to happen with Cena. Because I can think of, Roman Reigns, like, it's the obvious example, because him and Cena have very similar rises to the top when it comes to being the face of the company. But aside from those comparisons between how they became the faces of WWE, kayfabe and storyline-wise, they haven't really crossed paths as much as Cena versus Wyatt.
Yeah, because thinking about the two people from the modern era that have crossed paths the most with Cena, the two that I can think of right off the top of my head, Bray Wyatt and Rusev, I'd say.
Yes, Rusev would also be a good example because their whole United States Championship feud.
That seemed to have gone on. That seemed to last
forever. It kind of lasted forever.
Yeah. Then again, 2015, 2016, like, those were weird times.
I mean, 2016 WWE wasn't that bad.
I didn't say bad. I said
weird.
It was weird.
Okay. But Rusev and Wyatt really have a history with Cena. I'm thinking of other stars that have been with Cena in the past that he'd be interested to feud with. But obviously, Angle's retired. Randy and Edge are doing their own thing, obviously, as we saw last night. And everyone else from that era, like from the Ruthless Regression era, I just can't think of anyone else that would have been able to have a retirement match with Cena. Yeah. So, based on what you've said about Wyatt and their history together, I actually am in the camp that what we saw this weekend might have been it. And again, what a way to go out.
It was one of the things that I've wanted to see the most in wrestling, and that is a wrestling match that gets deconstructive and metatextual. It's one of the two things I've always wanted to see. The other thing that I've always wanted, and I've gotten it sometimes, is seeing the World Championship, the Heavyweight Championship, the big prize, that big belt that everyone wants to grab, is seeing that how it possessing it and the feeling of the power that someone gets from being in the top spot will change someone so greatly,
absolutely,
that it can change, that they become a completely different person. I think one of the most recent examples of that was Tommaso Ciampa, where he started like holding on to. He coveted that like it was his child. Mm-hmm.
There's like some crazy psychology going on with, or at least went on with Tommaso Ciampa holding that title. I actually think that's coming for Becky Lynch soon, because my theory is that as Becky keeps holding on to that title, we've already seen clues of this on Raw, but she's slowly but surely going to show cracks where she feels so empowered and entitled by being the man, by being the champion, that she's just going to be blind to like what the audience wants from her, and she's just going to grow even more egotistical and eventually being to the point where she's like, well, I don't need y'all. I was the man all along. I never needed y'all. And then I don't know who it's going to be, but when Becky loses that championship, it's going to be to someone who absolutely deserves it. And it's going to be really shocking. Like, they're going to build the fuck out of this person who's going to dethrone Becky. And that's just going to set her off even more. Like, the gold makes you crazy. It makes you hunger for desire, power. When you have that title on you, like, you get all the press releases, all the interviews, all of the star power that goes along with being the face of the company. And gold can just do, like, wild things to you. Yeah, like, I enjoyed what we talked about with the Firefly Funhouse. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? Like, any closing thoughts on Cena, Wyatt, the segment?
I am super curious. I am so ready for what we're going to see from wrestling as a whole once the pandemic is done.
And yeah, like, this was a great discussion. So I think we talked a lot of interesting topics around here. This was really fun. Like, thank you so much for joining me. Like, I'll totally hit you back up if there's a topic that interests you.
Oh yeah, I will absolutely be down for that.
Do you have a Twitch or YouTube where people can find you at, or?
Yes, I do. I do not do this regularly, but I do have a Twitch, and thanks to the ways of the world, I'm just going to refer to it as at the moment. I will be doing it more, but you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/rainbow_snack. That is SNEK.
Yes, snack. Not snake, snack. And I'll put that info in the description. Yeah.
I have a YouTube where I go by Rainbow Snake, but I do not upload anything to there yet. I do want to start doing video essays on wrestling on that channel, though. Those will be coming in the future. That's all there is about me. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope all of you enjoy this. Thanks so much for listening along, and have a great night.